सभी को नमस्कार। हमारे आर्कियोलॉजी एंड म्यूजियम्स हेरिटेज ऑफ इंडिया इस कोर्स का आज का ये तीसरा दिन है। मैं आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं और आज के हमारे प्रमुख वक्ता माननीय डॉक्टर एस.बी. ओता साहब का भी मैं यहाँ पर स्वागत करता हूं। यहाँ आज जो हमारा ये विषय होने वाला है उसके पहले मैं माननीय हमारे वक्ता जो है ओता साहब उनका परिचय देना चाहूंगा। Dr. S.B. Ota Sahab, he is retired as a Joint Director General from Archaeological Survey of India, New Delhi in 2017. He has also served as Director in charge of the Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Manav Sangrahalaya, Bhopal. Dr. Otaji is the recipient of Young Scientist Award from Indian Science Congress Association in 1987, awarded Charles Wells Indian Trust Fellowship in 1995, and was a short-term visiting fellow by Japan Foundation in 2006. He was the first director of National Mission on Monuments and Antiquities launched by Ministry of Culture, Government of India, under the aegis of Archaeological Survey of India. During his career as part of Archaeological Survey of India, he has undertaken large number of archaeological investigations in the different areas of the country. Some of the main projects include salvage archaeological investigations of the submerged area of Narmada Valley Dam projects in Madhya Pradesh and prehistoric investigation in high altitude Ladakh, Himalayas, Andaman Island, etc. He has a number of national and international publications on various subjects of archaeology, including archaeological heritage management. His field of interest includes prehistory, field archaeology, salvage archaeology, documentation, archaeological heritage management, structural conservation. Presently, Dr. Otaji is working on two major projects in prehistory. One is geoarchaeological investigations of Ashlian sites at Tikoda and Damungiri district, Raisen, Madhya Pradesh. Other one is the understanding early human occupations in high altitude Ladakh Himalayas. He has been awarded with Tagore National Fellowship in 2019 to continue his research on prehistory of Ladakh. So such a great personality is now with all of us. Most welcome, Dr. Ota Saab. I welcome again to you, and sincerely I request to you, please proceed for our today's session.
So should I present now my?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
The entire screen.
Yes.
Not coming.
Yeah, it will take half a minute, but it will come.
It's there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The full screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm extremely thankful to Deccan Archaeological and Cultural Research Institute and PANAS for telling me to interact with many of the professors, students, scholars, those who are already involved in archaeology and museums. One of the major points which I want to focus in my talk is all of us we know the prehistory occupies almost 99.9% of the total human history, which you call deep human history. If you take the complete human history, which starts almost 2.5 million years, 25 lakhs years back, till date, it almost occupies more than 99.9%. Somehow, when we see how many people are working in this particular subject, there are hardly very few. And I remember those days when I was a student and I was sitting in the class where prehistory is taught, and there are very few students used to prefer prehistory as their specialization. So I was unable to understand why it is so. So when I reached the professional career, I found that the lacuna remains with all of us, those who claim themselves as the professionals. I am also responsible for that, because somehow I find that we are unable to convince the students when we teach prehistory. We make it so dry. I mean, if you ask any of the students or anyone who has got little interest in prehistory, if you ask them, they'll ask, oh, prehistory. They're all stone tools, hand axes, cleavers, and all that. That's all. Do you feel that all this prehistory ends up with these stone tools? Nothing beyond that? So that's one of my focus of today's lecture. I'll try to convince to all of my audience that prehistory is not that dry. It's really a lovely subject like other archaeological, like Harappan archaeology or any other things. So it's not that dry. Never ends with the stone tools itself. Let's take a journey and how the prehistorians they investigate and try to find out the human history. Now, I'll tell you before going to that, I'll just make it a few points to make it very clear. In this diagram, if you find, finally, what do we do? What is the human culture finally? There is an environment and there's a human beings, and they interact with the environment for the survival. There is a symbiotic relationship between human beings and the environment at any given time, and the outcome is the cultural material. So what exactly we get in an archaeological context? We cannot see the human beings existing. We certainly get the archaeological evidences in the form of different antiquities, sites, and all that. And as far as the environment is concerned, there are signatures on our landscape, and this is the job of the archaeologists to find out the paleo environment. So once we understand the environment then and the cultural material then, we can presume the human behavior. Now another job, if you see any of the culture, for example, Harappan culture, because why I'm giving you the example of Harappan, because everyone knows about the Harappan culture, when it was existing something like 5,000 years back. It was exactly like a living culture then, which you call an ethnographic context. The culture 5,000 years back, Harappan culture was in a dynamic form. Everything was living form. So subsequently what happened? This became a part of the archaeological context, got buried. There was no more a dynamic form of the culture. It became a completely static, only in the form of archaeological material. Now here our job, archaeologist's job starts. We start exploring the areas, excavate the site, recover the materials, and give a meaning to it, to these cultural materials, give a dynamic form to the cultural material. That is how we reconstruct the cultural life of early man. Now, I'll give you a small diagram. It's very easy to understand. Archaeologists, they never end with the artifacts. Our job is to reconstruct the human behavior, what man was doing, what exactly he was doing in the past. So for that, we get artifacts, we archaeologists, and there's a landscape. It has undergone a change through the ages. Even environment has undergone a change. These three things we can, in fact, pinpointly study it in the past. Once we know all these things, then what is the human behavior that can really be presumed, really be reconstructed? So never ever end with the artifacts. Now coming to our prehistoric studies, many people are doing historical archaeology. I specialize in prehistory. Many like me, there are many archaeologists in the country. Those are working with the stone tools. When you go back in time, what happens? First thing is, there are many perishable materials that gets destroyed through time. So once we go back in time, all these materials materials are extremely limited. There are many things get destroyed. Use of minimum varieties of material culture. Go back in time, you'll get stone tools or bone tools as the main object. When you come to the complex societies like Harappans, so many ornaments, so many materials, house patterns, and everything. Come to the historical period, forts and temples, you get everything. So when you go back in time, there are very, very limited varieties of material culture, cultural material, and greater time factor leading to greater transformation of material. When you go back in time, many of the materials gets modified. So when we archaeologists recover all these materials from the sediments, from the earth crust, those have been modified. And the challenge lies how from the modified form of the material culture, we can interpret or best the material cultural culture of the past human beings. And the greater environmental impact leading to greater transformation of material. When you go back in time, what happens? Lot of flood, drought, many of the sediments have been there are the earthquakes, many things have happened on the earth crust. All the materials that were discarded, say 10 lakh years back, must have been disturbed by the natural agencies. So that is also a challenge to all of us, how to study that. I'll show you all those. Now, when prehistorians, those who work on prehistory, stone tools, we have got certain principles. Because I'm completely, simplifying the whole lecture. Objective is to understand past human behavior and reconstruct past life ways. That is the objective. The prehistorian's objective is not just to classify the stone tools, give some percentage, what is hand axe, cleaver, scraper, chopper, nothing beyond that. No, that is just a fraction of the total prehistory. Our job is to reconstruct the past human behavior and the life ways of human bygone ages. Beyond lithics, adding flesh and blood, what archaeologists they do? We recover all these small evidences in the form of cultural material. Our job is to really add flesh and blood and reconstruct the life of the culture. So all these lithic materials are the just which you call skeletal materials, the skeleton of the total human culture in the past. So how, if a good prehistorian, what he does, on that skeleton, if I add flesh and blood, though that means the human behavior and everything, if I try to understand, then I will be able to understand the complete human culture. And we call it a beyond laundry list. If some of you have read or seen the books written on prehistory or many of the articles, in most of the articles what you find, oh, so and so has found a site. There are 5,000 artifacts classified, so many hand axes, so many cleavers, so many scrapers, so many cores, flakes, and percentages, which you call a laundry list. What is a laundry list? When you give clothes to the dhobi, we prepare a list, how many shirts, how many pants, how many towels, and all that. This is how we prepare a list. We never go beyond that. But that is not the job of the archaeology. The archaeology's job is to reconstruct the prehistoric life ways. Avoid stepmother attitude towards the lithic debitas. You must have seen, if some of you have read the prehistory articles, most of the articles I'm telling. Now there what we mentioned, how many hand axes, how many cleavers. So prehistorians are mostly attracted towards hand axes, cleavers, chopper, all the finished tools. But what we say, that is just a fraction. But all those debitas, the byproduct of the stone tools, when we manufacture the stone tools, all those debris, flakes, chips, cores, that is usually neglected. Should not be, because Prehistorians need to study those so that we'll be able to reconstruct. For example, you go to a carpenter's workshop, you may not find a finished chair or table. The moment you see all those debris of different nature, you'll be able to make out, okay, this workshop must have manufactured some chairs or some tables. But the different types of debris we see. So that also gives us a clue. And the present holds the key to the past. Because we do not have a time machine that we can travel back in time and see how 10 lakh years back people are there. So the present day communities, but primitive societies can really be studied how these people, still primitive, are interacting with the various environment, how they're adapting themselves to that environment. That gives us a clue to the past. Because we are in the metros, many of us might not be knowing what happens in the villages. You'll be surprised that many of the present day small villages are almost similar when you excavate the Harappan sites or any of the Chalcolithic sites or historical sites. Many of the houses, hearth, kitchen, everything remains same. So culture doesn't change very fast unless there is some other aspect attached to it. Otherwise, if you study these primitive societies, that gives us a clue to understand the past. And since when you go back in time, the evidences are very, very limited, we will have to be very, very careful. Because how these forensic scientists, they work? Because there are evidences, there is a murder case, somewhere there is lying some blood, some are knife, some dead body and all that. So they go collect all these small evidences, bits and pieces which are lying here and there, and bring it and join it together and reconstruct the complete story. That is what the archaeologists they do. Our evidences are very limited and lying scattered. All these evidence have to be picked up and has to be seen in its context and see how they're all connected and to our past life. Error in research. Never ever think that whatever we get from the archaeological excavations are 100% correct. Even physics, chemistry, when they study, there is an error. So all archaeologists need to understand what is the error in their study. Unless we understand the error, we cannot simply interpret the past. Otherwise, our interpretation will be wrong. Now I'll take you all those things which I just told you, how these are seen in the field. I'll take you to one of the projects in central India, Madhya Pradesh. I'm working in the Raisen district. This is an Asulian site. Asulian means a lower Paleolithic, and this is where I'm working, the Raisen district. These hills are of Vindhyan quartzite hills. And the valley floor is the Deccan trap, which is a basalt. Basalt weathers very fast, and those are all cultivated hills, hillocks in between. So I'll take you to this small area. This is hardly 2 kilometers radius I'm working for last 10 years. And there are a lot of information. That is how we can really extract the information about the human beings. Now, this is a Vindhyan hill. This is the Deccan trap area. This is another hill on this side. This is a valley floor. Now, if you see the aerial view of that area, this is a foothill area. You can see the very thick sediments of yellowish in color. There's a lot of erosion has taken place. This is aerial view from the drone. Now, if you go to that site, they're littered with artifacts. Literally hundreds and thousands of. See the concentration. In every 1 square meter, you'll find 8 to 10 artifacts are lying. These are all artifacts, not natural stones. Now, the artifacts are so much, hardly you will get other stones there. Even the villagers, there are tribal bone wheels, they are there. When they worship, all the handeks, this is a cleaver, this is a handeks, which looks very unusual in shape. They find that, oh, this cannot be in nature. So these are all unusual. So they collect it and worship. They call it a Gwal Baba, protector of the cattle in the forest. Now, when we go for any of the investigations, like any science subjects, you should be very, very clear what is your objectives of the research. If you do not, because objectives can be n number, infinity. I mean, those objectives need to be focused. So one has to define the objectives before going to the field. So our objective was to study only the Acheulean culture. That's a lower Paleolithic. And second objective was intra and inter-settlement pattern. Intra-settlement pattern means within a settlement, what are the different human activities going on? Intra-settlement between two Acheulean settlements, how they are interacting. Third one, assemblage variability both in time and space. Because the Acheulean culture, the lower Paleolithic culture in that area must have continued for a couple of thousands years. So we feel that the assemblage there must have been changed through time and in the different areas of the landscape. So how the assemblage changes both in time and space, that has to be studied, because those are all related to the human behavior. And finally, the transformation of Acheulean industry, how the Acheulean industry has undergone a change. Now, this is the area, this is a hill, V-shaped valley. The yellow dots are some of the Acheulean localities. I'll take you to one. This is one locality which is called Tikoda 1. On this slope, this yellow patch has got the large number of artifacts, not on this darker, because these are all rocky, and in between there is a small space which has got the finer sediments deposited coming out from the weathered sands from these hills. And here, most of the artifacts are lying on the surface. Many people think that if something is lying on the surface, cannot be studied, these are all disturbed. No. Our job is to study how much disturbance has taken place as an archaeologist. If disturbance has taken place, which the nature of disturbance and the degree of disturbance need to be studied. Then only we will be able to reconstruct. So our job was to understand the distribution pattern of the artifacts and their context, whether it's occurring in the sediment context or the rocky context, in what context is occurring, and the site formation, which you call understanding of the disturbance processes. Now, this is the area which is full of artifacts. You can see the red flags. So wherever there are artifacts, we have just shown it, because each of the artifacts need to be recorded with 10 different parameters, because those are in the original context, beautiful artifacts are littered on the surface. So what we did, we never pick up a single artifact from its context. We call the context means as it is lying. So we locate it first, then each of these artifacts are beautifully recorded, a map is prepared, GPS recording has been done, photographed, and there are 10 different parameters, how it's lying, whether it's disturbed, whether it's slightly tilted, all things are noted. Each of the artifacts takes nearly 15 minutes to do a detailed documentation. That is how we do even the photography. This is one artifact, one side is very, very mint condition, very fresh, another side is slightly abraded. That means a surface that was lying to the one side was exposed to the surface, water was flowing on that for a pretty long time, and it has been abraded. So each of the artifacts tells a story how it was got deposited. So everything is being recorded. Once we did that, we kept on plotting it. We found there are beautiful clusters formed. So probably because they are all hunter-gatherers, so they must have occupied, because this was one of the area very congenial, because there is a water channel here, and they must have occupied. These are all seasonal water channel. They must have occupied only in a particular season, particular dry season, and these are the different clusters. Clusters indicates a band occupation. A small group of people must have stayed there for quite some time and did some activities. Now I'll take you to another site where there is a lot of sediment in the same area. It has got something like 8 to 10 meters thick deposit of Australian. Now what we do, we never, as I told you, we never pick up everything as it is. So all these things, if you're seeing, we do a grid, complete 1 meter grid. All the artifacts are lying at. Then we put the flags and point out each and every. For that area, we detail contour map with the total station is prepared, because we try to see whether artifacts are flowing as per the slope or not. If the artifact shows that they're flowing as per the slope gradient, that means it has undergone the disturbance. Then once we pick up from each of the grids, there are the number of artifacts that we have recovered from each of the 1 meter grid. And this is a beautiful documentation. This is called a mosaic photography. Each of the 1 meter grid, which is originally photographed with 7 to 8 or 10 MB photograph, it has been joined, putting together. And this couple of GB weightage, it's a huge photograph. You can blow it up to the natural size. You can see each and every stone lying on the surface. This is what you call, before we disturb, everything need to be recorded in its context. Because tomorrow, many of the interpretation can be done if the proper recording has been done. This is how we do the recording. Before lifting it from the surface, every bit of the stones, the way it's lying on the surface, is recorded through the mosaic photograph. Then we plot it. See their orientation, how it is done. These are the orientation of each of the artifacts computed. Now, if you see these are evenly distributed, means they are not following the slope direction. That clearly shows it has not undergone a disturbance. Then we try to study the landscape there. What happens, even if the sediments gets eroded, the artifacts never gets eroded because it has got the gravity, it has got the weight. So sediments get eroded and slowly the artifacts settles at that place. So each of the category of the artifacts, like side flake, end flake, this is the distribution of hand axes. This is a distribution of cleavers. So different type of artifacts, once we plot it on the map, each of the artifacts, you see the patterning, clusters, where people occupied, how they manufactured, all these things can really be compared. I'm showing just a fraction of that, how the things are studied. Now, once we lift all these artifacts on the surface, we have gone for the excavations. And the excavations is extremely meticulous because we'll have to be careful. Our digging is hardly 1 or 2 centimeters each digging. If you see this much things we have dug in 6 months, this is a 5 meter by 5 meter area. There are, for 5 meter by 5 meter area, do you know how many archaeologists are engaged? There are 3 to 4 archaeologists are there to watch in each and every artifact the way it's coming. It's not that collecting the artifacts and putting in the envelope. No, the way it's lying, it's recorded. The moment we tap any of the artifacts, we never pick up. It remains as it is. So we have got a beautiful notebook where each of the artifacts are picked up with 10 different entries, the way it's lying. Its depth, 3D, and the way it's lying, all context, everything. It takes time. Then we also go for the mosaic photography. This is how we do for each of the grids, and the grids are again joined. These are all separate photographs. Now you get the way you are seeing excavating the surface, similar fashion, you keep on recording it. Okay. Even the sections, very deep sections, about 5-10 meters. Now, how to take a photograph? You cannot do it. So what we did, complete sections are divided with very small grids. 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, half a meter by half a meter. Each of the grids are photographed vertically with the normal lens. These are very deep trenches, and all those photographs, this section photo must have contained something like 150 to 200 photographs joined. Then you get exactly without any distortion all the landscape formation and all. Likewise, this contains quite a large number of photographs. Now, the other thing is, besides artifacts, we also are concerned about the paleo-environmental studies. So almost all the paleo-environmental signatures we find on the sediments in which the artifacts are lying. So there is a detailed collection of the sediments in every 5 centimeters. And these are analyzed for different studies, like phytoliths. Some of you must be knowing about the phytoliths. The way we have got the kidney stones, the plant has also got in its cell a lith, quartz, which gets remains in each of the plant cells. And these silica particles never get destroyed. And this remains in the sediments for millions of years. And these phytoliths can be extracted from the sediments, and the vegetation pattern of that particular period can also be interpreted. Likewise, starch grains, from potatoes and all that, we get starch grains. So these starch grains are nothing but the sugar particles. And this remains in the sediments again for millions of years. So these are the indicators of vegetation at different point of time. And thirdly, pollens, all of you know, the pollens can also survive for millions of years. All these things are extracted, and those are working on the paleobotany, they have extracted from the sediment and studied, and they give us a diagram in which period, what are the different plants. Besides, the sediments are also tested for the different rainfall pattern and many other environmental signatures. Now, another thing is the dating, because we cannot go for the carbon-14 AMS dating. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond 50, 60,000 years. So one of the major things is a paleomagnetic dating. It's very tedious to collect the sample. The sample should not be disturbed. We cut the sediments as it is in situ from all the sides, give a direction, because many of the students must be knowing there are 4 reversals in our earth, and these 4 magnetic reversals are well dated, and those signatures remains in the sediments, and we collect the sediments like this in the block and give it to the geologists to study, give us a date on the basis of the paleomagnetic. Now the sediments, we do collect the artifacts, but the sediments we collect, those are not artifacts. Of course, we collect the sediments for paleo-environmental studies, that is preserved. But what about the rest of the sediments? Those sediments are never thrown as it is, which doesn't contain any of the artifacts. So what we do, we decant all the sediments. We wash first we do the flotation, then you go for the washing of the sediments for the finer particles. The finer particles we remove, and the heavier particles we collect. Then you put it on the sieve to extract the microdebitas. I'll show you what the microdebitas it is. When you break the stone, when the artifacts are manufactured, one flake comes out. Along with one flake, it creates millions of small microflakes. How it looks like? This looks like that. From that sediments, these small chips are taken out. These are the very good indicators. It's exactly like forensic scientists. There are in the sediments, if we get certain artifact, large number of artifacts, but the sediment do not contain any of these microdebitas. That means artifacts, large number of artifacts doesn't mean that artifacts are manufactured at the site. Wherever the manufacturing takes place, that need to contain, that sediment need to contain, bound to contain your microdebitas. I'll show you how. When you manufacture hand axes, we are manufacturing this experimental work. When you manufacture hand axes, the lot of flakes comes out. For manufacturing one hand axe, we prepare the hand axe, it's a hammer. There are bigger flakes, smaller flakes, these will be there. And these small particles, literally lakhs and lakhs, millions and millions of small particles, this cannot be removed by human beings. That becomes a part of the sediments and remains. This can be cleared by the human beings in the past, can be thrown anywhere, but this becomes a part of the sediments. If in any in the excavations, if you do not get the indications of the microdebites, that means because it was manufactured here, that's why we are getting here. But if you see the sediments here, you will not get the microdebitas, only the bigger debitas. Means the bigger debita was thrown. It was not manufactured here. That is how we come to know. Now, even we do a lot of studies how in the past artifact must have moved. There are many sediments which cracks. So artifacts also travels down and sidewise. In the black sediment, artifact gets into the sediments. It's not in the original context. As an archaeologist, how we predict it. In the excavations, even the cracks are also occurring in the past. So how we do, all these cracks are recorded in the excavations. I'll show you one example. This is the excavation trench. If you see all these calcium carbonate nodules, they form in a curvatory feature, exactly following a crack. And this crack is not a modern crack. This crack must have occurred a couple of lakhs of years contemporary to the Australian, when all these things got populated. Because above this, there are several meter sediments, which is already gone. So this is how the past cracks, the cracks that occur during the Australian can also be determined. And any artifact we get, all these things belong to this particular level. And you can see once it goes down, it becomes smaller. So that is how each of the artifact need to be studied for its context, so that error gets reduced and interpretation becomes better. Now, this is another site where a lot of undisturbed all these artifacts are. You can see beautifully, they are all artifacts clustered. These are the indications of the banned societies. A group must have stayed for a couple of months, and this is how we record in detail, so that the paleo demography can be reconstructed, how the human movement was taking place, where people are staying exactly, and they must have erected some sort of a superstructure of wood and all that, which is already gone through time, perishable materials. And that area where I'm working, from where they're getting the metal, huge boulder, we call it a giant course. They have removed the flakes. How they right from extracting the raw material up to the finished product, which you got chain operating system, that one need to understand how they were right from source up to the finished product, how it was undergone the system, and that will help us in understanding the human behavior. And the beautiful artifacts you can see in that area, hand access. Now, besides, we do study the different weathering pattern of the rocks, because this need to be studied by the archaeologist, because there are many of the fractures looks like man-made fractures, but there is a little difference which you call a thermal fracture. If we do not understand the natural fracture patterns, we cannot understand the human behavior. Otherwise, that is how many people, I have seen in many of the collections, they call it it's a flake. But originally, it's a flake, natural flake. Because of the thermal fracture, thing has come out and all that. So one has to understand how nature behaves on the rock and the area, where the landscape behavior need to be understood to understand the human adaptation strategies. This is the area we study how and where, in which form water remains in that area in the dry season, and what happens in the rainy season. Rainy season, everywhere you'll get water, different aquifers. But in the dry season, water comes down. Now, keeping these landscape change in the different 2 seasons. What is the patterning of the sites? When I found the sites, most of the sites we found, they are all very close to the water bodies, which is probably some sort of a perennial water bodies, now defunct. So that is how one can understand the human movement in the past. These are the wet season, how it happens. Because there are many areas where you get the artifacts today, but there is no water. But if you study the rainy seasons on the slope, how water is behaving, how water comes out, that gives us the idea to understand the human behavior. Now, nowadays, drone everyone knows, but this drone is slightly different. This is a drone which the army people or the police they use, not the marriage sort of drone, because it has got a different setting. You can set the altitude, you can set the geo coordinate. It goes there, become static, and it can take the infrared photography, everything. This is called the Netra. So this is what goes up. This is a much bigger one, and the geomorphological feature, because that's a thickly forested area. Even we lose our way when we explore the area. So we trace all the landscape features from these photographs, including, these are all from aerial photograph, all these clusters can be tapped. It's beautiful. I mean, each of the stones can really be counted. So that is the strength of these drone photography. Then I'll take you to another. I'll in fact, we traveled here, the sites that I showed you. Now that is all these artifacts, and the area is lying very close to the Bindian sandstone area. I'll take you to another area, which is a valley floor, and there is no sandstone available, not even a single, no sandstone hill or the quartzite hill. They are all Deccan trap area. So raw material is only available here, no raw material available here. Now, this area, everything, all the quartzite and sandstone are artifacts. This is in Deccan trap area. Each of these stones are brought from this. You can see the hill behind. From this is the only source. From there, it's about 2 to 2.5 kilometers distance. From there, everything was carried out. Any stone which is of sandstone or quartzite is bound to be an artifact. So there is a heavy concentration in one locality. We cleared it, prepared a grid, took this mosaic photography. You can blow it up and see each of the grids. Then we started plotting each and every artifact. It took us 4 months to plot it on the surface. And there are a number of archaeologists who were engaged in doing their drawing, photography, 10 different parameters and all that. After lifting the surface like this, see, I mean, I'll take you back. When you started doing it, you will remove I'll still further back, I'll take everything, all grasses are gone. We started doing the documentation. Grasses have started growing. You can make out. Then by the time we completed and started a trial trench, the trees have started growing. It took so many months to do it. We require patience to understand the human behavior. Why you took the trenches? How the surface features gets reflected there. And what do we get? The evidences below, very interesting. These are all black sediments, means these are all the weather product from the basalt. And this is also a weather product of basalt, but the red sediments. This is very clay, this is sandy. Here, the occupation is all throughout. But here, this is a very muddy. In the rainy season, what happens? It becomes a muddy. One cannot simply walk on this. Black sediments, clay sediments stick to this. This is not good for habitation. Only once we found in the past Australian period, this area was repeatedly occupied 4 times, whereas this area was occupied only once. That is what we'll be able to detail. Statistical studies and the contextual studies will tell us repeated occupation, one-time occupation and all that. This is how the trench, which is full of artifacts top to bottom. Whereas, and all the beautiful artifacts in the red sediments, you can see. Whereas in the black sediments, it's a very clay, this is not good for habitation. Just imagine 15 lakhs years back, when this is thickly forested, it must be very muddy. And muddy with sticks. And just imagine, black sediment supports thicker vegetation with a lot of creepers, which is not the case in the sandy sediment. So sandy sediments are better for habitation. So that was usually favored by the Australia. So these are the artifacts from the sites, beautiful artifacts from the excavations, and not hand access cleavers. I'll show you one. There are, to study the hand access, my students are studying hand access and cleavers for last 2 years, because there are many things to study from here. Now, one of the things, when we started studying hand access, everything is hand access, but from that side, you can see the length classes. If you see, there are 4 different types of hand access. Only if we consider the length character. And from 1314 to 1819 centimeter, that was maximum in use. But there are used like very 24, 25, they're very big, 23, 24 centimeter, very big. There are very small ones. And there are smaller ones. That clearly shows they're all functionally, it's different. Likewise, cleavers are also in 4 categories. So like that, we do lot of statistical analysis, morphometric analysis to understand its usage, its function and all. Now, beautiful, there is a selection for the raw material. Can I take another 10 minutes?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
So there are a lot of bolas. Bolas means, spheroids, because this is a unique feature we do get, but here in our side, they are plentifully available. Do not know for what purpose. Even anywhere in the world, there are different, hypotheses for it. So, but we do get is one of the very characteristic feature of it. I was telling you how we determine. These are the cleavers. If you see this surface, this is a thermally fractured surface. People are so intelligent. All 4 pieces are thermally fractured stones. Then they have removed the flakes from all sides to modify it as a cleaver. Because when there is any boulder which has got lot of patination, weathered surface, what prehistoric man must have done it? They'll have to chip up, remove the surface which is weathered surface, go for the core portion of the rock which is labor intensive. Then only they will be knowing the quality of the rock. If there is a lot of flaws, that is just useless. But here in case of thermal fracture, they looked for thermally fractured pieces which are all fresh and clearly shows whether there is any flaws or joints or not. And natural beautiful edges they get. Only thing, they'll have to trim on 1 or 2 surfaces, sides, to convert it as a hand access or a cleaver. So they're so intelligent. They're understanding. Sometimes I say that if you ask me who are the earliest, first geologist, it is the prehistoric human beings. They're the first geologists. They understood the raw material, particular different types of rocks, their flaws pattern, thermally fractured, everything was because they gathered all that knowledge through generation together, lot of experiments. And this is what you call their traditional knowledge system. I'll take you to another site in that same basaltic area. They are all artifacts in the basaltic horizon. See, each and every artifact we do not pick up. These are all couple of thousands, 4 or 5 thousands. To record all this, it took us 1 month. Then you go to the next level. Now, like that, this is about 50 to 60 centimeters. For digging of this, we took 12 months, 6 months in a year, 2 years. This whole area got excavated. And the surface on which the prehistoric people, they occupied, the Australian men occupied, was this surface. So beautifully we removed the way the surface were undulated. The same surface was created. You know, if you dig with the big pickaxe, you will never get the surface on which exactly the prehistoric man started occupying it. This is that surface which you created. And this is the total deposit. In that, we have got two different phases. And just mark, these are literally thousands and thousands of artifacts thrown at one place. They are all big artifacts. This is a mosaic photography. We call it as well. This is the first evidence, is the only evidence in India, which you call a dump. You know, they must be manufacturing a lot of things, habitation, because the moment you break a stone, it has got the very sharp edge. That area you cannot inhabit. Because if you have done some napping, stone napping, you find there are very sharp edges. So these are all removed, all the discarded things, and piled up, dumped at one place. So here, when we tested, as I told you, the sediments, we didn't find any evidence of microdeposits, only the larger flakes which are rejected. This is a dump, discard by the Australian human beings, Australian community. And beautiful fresh artifacts in that area. The site has yielded beautiful artifacts. And we'll have to so minutely study, because all are almost 99.9% are on quartzite and sandstone, but there are few basalt. Basalts are very fragile. And I am talking about this site, which is about 1.5 million, 15 lakhs years old. And we get basaltic flakes and all that. They must have used local material available, but those are not good for using it for anything, but they did use it. Then we got a lot of evidences of red ochre, robbed red ochre. We have got the evidences from India at different places, from lower Paleolithic period, from the excavations, the use of red ochre. We do not know, because Neanderthal, if you know, Neanderthal body was decorated with the red ochre. And they must be doing some sort of a decoration on the stones, which is not surviving today. But they have used red ochre for some sort of use. And we have got the evidences of ostrich egg cells. Everyone believed that ostrich remained in the terminal Pleistocene about 40-45,000 years back, but we have now got it from the lower Pleistocene level, lower Paleolithic level. And if you minutely do, these are very small pieces. See, these are all 2 centimeter pieces. The molluscas, bivalves, and all that we have collected. But this gives us the idea about the environment, their food habits, and all that. Thank you. Probably I was very fast, and I should thank all the participants for our patience hearing. And if anyone has got any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Hello. Sir, what is geoarchaeological dating method used in basically prehistory, sir?
In prehistory, particularly Stone Age cultures.
Geoarchaeology, sir. For geoarchaeology, sir. For
Yes.
geoarchaeology.
Geoarchaeology is what? Geological studies only. Context we see. So whatever we use, the same thing is used in geology also. I'll tell you 3 major methods. One is the thermoluminescence. Now it is called OSL. Dating. So sediments are dated in the OSL. We do the paleomagnetic dating of the sediments in the same. Sediments, quaternary people, they also do it. But there is one more method which we do that has recently started, which we call aluminum beryllium dating. Directly the stone tools can be dated, which you call the cosmogenic dating. You must have heard about the Otirampakam. Otirampakam is the first lower Paleolithic site which has dated 1.4 to 1.5 million, has been done by paleomagnetic and supported by the cosmogenic dating of the artifacts. So these are the 3 major methods we use for the quaternary period, Pleistocene period. Yes.
Hello.
Sir,
Hello.
may I ask
Hello.
a
Hello.
question?
May I?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to know how much are
At a time, only one person. Please ask the question. Please unmute to yourself. Please understood.
Yes, sir. Thank
Yes.
you very much. Thank you very much, Etaji, for your beautiful presentation on investigation of prehistory culture. Here I am Ranveer Singh from Odisha.
Yeah.
As you know, Odisha is a land of rich cultural heritage,
Yes.
specifically in prehistory. In regards to that, it has hundreds of rock art sites, including painting and engraving, and numbers of rock art sites have been discovered. So here, my question is that why 99.9% of prehistoric sites, specifically having rock art, only belongs to western part of Odisha in comparison to the coastal part? Whether it is due to the geographical or geomorphological situation or any other else, sir, please.
Because for any rock painted rock shelters, we require shelters, a base, a stone. We believe because all the paintings that are in the caves and shelters, water never touches there, that remains, gets preserved. But we cannot say that other places didn't have. Even on the rock or open rock, must be having paintings in the past because it has not survived. Anything has not survived doesn't mean that it was never done. It must have been done because all these painted rock shelter sites are mostly belong to either Neolithic or Mesolithic period. So there are other areas where there is no caves and rock shelters, but there are Mesolithic sites are there. But there are rock boulders. They must have done paintings in the past, but they have not survived. But if you see why Madhya Pradesh has got so many paintings,
Yes,
God has got, and southwestern Orissa, Sundargarh, Sambalpur, and all that. This is a part of the Ghat area
yes,
because there are shelters. It's not that only human beings prefer the shelters, they are also staying in the open area and where the boulders are there. So, boulders must have been painted. We cannot say that it was not painted because that won't survive. It's only survived in the caves and rocks. And that could be the reason, I find.
yes. Then what kind of rock or rock surface they adopted for the execution of art? Specifically?
Because again, there is no choice. They must have done it on quartzite. They must have done it in the sandstone. We have got the Mesolithic sites in basaltic area. As you know that on the basalt also they must have done it because in the south, if you go, they have done it on the granite. Granite can survive. Quartzite can survive. But in the sandstone, if you come to Bhimbetka, it's a wonderful study. It's the orthoquartzite. The sandstone shelters, you will find the paintings have been very deteriorating because the particles are coming out. They must have done it even in the basalt. Basalt won't survive. So it's not that painting is such a thing, they must have, because that was only meant for their contemporary society in the prehistory when they were existing. So they must have done it on the various surfaces. Only thing quartzite and granite and good quality sandstone could survive. Other things have not survived. That's what would be the explanation. Right.
Thank you very much.
Subarna Banerjee ji. Subarna Banerjee ji, please.
how much archaeological evidence do we really have for the Vedic age?
You please mute your another account.
Yeah, there are two.
I am writing the message.
Okay.
Now you please ask.
Yeah.
How much archaeological evidence do we have for the Vedic age?
That's a very tricky question. Now, Vedic age, the moment you call it, because Vedic age has been determined on the basis of literary evidences. Okay? Those who study the Indology and all that. That's another discipline. And we have got certain evidences which corroborates the Vedic age. For example, I'll tell you, because I do not specialize on that, but I can give a few examples. Those who are studying Harappan type of burials, and many other fortifications, and many other aspects, rituals that have been recovered from the Harappan excavations, found a place in Vedic literature. So that is one thing. There is a connection, because archaeologists, though they are depending on archaeological facts, we never ignore the literary evidences. We know that there is a extrapolations and all that, but that doesn't mean that we should outright reject the literary evidences. Those who are studying Chalcolithic sites or the particularly historical period, they do consider it because they get a lot of clues from the literary evidences. So giving a particular date, it's still big debate and all that, people are doing it. I do not want to get into that controversies, but that's what I can say you. Many people think that literary evidences are useless. Many archaeologists, it's not. It's not. It's exactly like the when we interpret, taking into consideration the ethnographic parallels. Exactly, these are some of the records in the past. There must have been some modification, interpolations, and all that. It's our job to take out those interpolations, and the hardcore fact can be connected. Am I clear, man?
Yes, thank you, sir. One last question by Rohan Mathur in our chat box. Why ostrich eggs are only found in almost western part of India, like Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh? And sir, please suggest good books on prehistory.
Yeah. Ostrich we have got from Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Rajasthan. These are all places have yielded, because just imagine in what scenario ostrich can survive. Ostrich was there during the terminal Pleistocene, when there is a comparatively dry, even today they're staying dry, and that was the area comparatively. When ostrich was there is a dry phase all over the country, which you call terminal Pleistocene dry phase. But compared to the other areas, these are the areas was comparatively dry. And all animals have got a beautiful concept of territory. They adapt the way we adapt ourselves to the environment. Animals also do. So animals have got their own territory. They are confined to one particular area. That could be the reasons. Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Bilal Shahji want to ask the last question. Bilal Shah, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir, and good evening from Kashmir.
Yes.
Sir, my question to Ota sir is rather this is a query. The drone photographs showed by you are very nice. Sir, do you think the archaeology in India is yet traditional, and what the Indian archaeology lacks is the basic archaeological training like surveys, total station training, and cartography, which is the foundation in the modern archaeology, or we can tell this is a European model of archaeology or digital archaeology. Sir, please elaborate about this.
Because if you ask me personally, I never totally depend on the digital archaeology. Why I'm saying, many people are nowadays exploring the sites, location, everything sitting in the lab from the aerial photography and all that. Yes. But information, interesting information which you get, unless and until you stand on the site, visit, there are many observations. I'm telling you, all these drone photography, everything will give you the facts only. They will not interpret for you. If I want to interpret, 99% of the informations I get after going to the site. My mind works. I put myself in that environment. For example, I have got a Australian site right inside the forest. The moment I stand, I think, can I survive? How many plant foods are there? Where is the water body? How I can travel? What I can see from this location? How the prehistoric man must have visualized the landscape? All these things, your digitization and everything, all these photographs won't help. They will help to a certain extent. They'll lead you to a particular point. But if you want to have a good interpretation about the past human beings, it's only and only your two legs and mind, where you go to that site, travel to the site, spend some time, take yourself back in time, think how those people must have survived. That thinking, that is what, different from other disciplines we archaeologists have.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. With your kind permission, if the permission is there only, then Upasana Chatterjee want to ask one question.
Yes, absolutely no problem. Any number of questions.
Yeah, Upasana ji, please ask now.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I'm Upasana from Darjeeling. Sir, I wanted to ask, sir, you mentioned the indigenous people like Gonds who live nearby. So I wanted to ask if they're still associated with these stone tools even today, or are there any oral traditions associated with these tools, which the Gonds still have?
Yeah. Gonds are not doing this lithic activity because these are because as you know, the tribal communities have got a core area and the peripheral area. Where I am working is the peripheral area of the Gonds. And if I have also worked in the core areas of the Gonds, because they are not doing any, working with the lithics. But there are few things I have noticed. They are very interesting. And there are some articles have been published, one by Babul Roy and with the parallels. Very recently people have worked. You must have heard the name of S.C. Malik. Okay? So there are many people have worked 30, 40, 50 years back. What they have reported, do you know? From the Narmada Valley, which was about a core area of the Gonds in the past. Now it's a peripheral area. There you will find beautiful flakes, chips taken out from glass bottles. Big thick glass, bottom portion. It's exactly like a quartz. And from the porcelain, British time, all the things are discarded. They pick up and they have removed the flakes. Those are all reported in many of the articles now. That means the tradition of manufacturing lithic artifacts among many of the communities in India continued probably 150, 200 years old. Now it's very fast disappearing. But what I have seen, these shepherds, they go to the forest. They collect a stick. How they polish the stick, do you know? They just break a stone, get a flake and scrape, and the bark comes out, beautiful polish they get. What it is. And secondly, this taking on fire for the biddies and all that. Most of the tribals even today in the core area, Bhils and all, they don't use matchbox. They have got a small box with small ruins, and they have got these quartz and particularly chalcedony stones. They take out the fire. And there are, one should work, in fact, to find out this continuity. And I'm 100% sure I understand that this such evidences, which is already now gone, but we can trace those continuity evidences which got defunct 150 years back that need to be traced. I'm sure we'll get.
Thank you so much, sir. So I just wanted to share a very small thing, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in this part of the country, sir, I'm in Darjeeling, Kalimpong, Sikkim area. Sir, there are usually polished cells which are found from the Neolithic times. So these have completely lost their context. They are known as Sadar Longs in the lecture language. And then they use it as talismans, or they are believed to be thunderstones, which have been showered from the... So, these... I just wanted to know how this change came about. How did they kind of lose the context, or how did they Now, how are
Yeah.
they interpreting it in a very different way?
Did you work with me in Bhimbetka? No.
Sorry, sir?
You worked in Kalimpong area, Neolithic?
Yes, sir. Sir, I'm actually pursuing my research in this area, Sikkim, Kalimpong, Darjeeling area.
Right. Now, it's a very interesting, somehow those who are working in prehistory of Sikkim and Northeast, one thing they are looking, they collect, you go to any of the villages in Sikkim, you will find these polished stone cells. They keep it as the auspicious symbol, and it, as you told, that it has come from the thunderbolt and all that. That is what they believe. But none of the archaeologists are asking from where you have collected. If you go back to those areas, all these cells have been collected from the hill slope where there is a zoom cultivation, terrace cultivation. Am I correct? Upasana?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. So you're correct, sir.
Yes. Those areas need to be investigated. Now, what the archaeologists are doing in Northeast, they collect all these things from different houses and interpret. And if you go back and ask these people from where you have collected, they'll tell, we collected my father, grandfather, great-great-grandfather, because they're still, zoom cultivation, terrace cultivation is still there, shifting cultivation is there on the hills. So they have collected from there. They have, in fact, forgotten it. There is a big gap between the Neolithic and we people, doing the shifting cultivation. Now they have forgotten. It's a very strange object. And this tradition, particularly myth, is there for the complete Northeast, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Northeast area. This is the belief, because that clearly shows there is a gap, time gap. But one thing, the whole procedure of survey need to be changed in Northeast. You go to the original areas, you may find some of the manufacturing spot, you may find some of the potteries associated, instead of collecting only from the houses.
Yes, sir. So there was one more query.
Yeah.
So the earlier archaeologists who have worked on this region, they mentioned that it was an aceramic culture with no pottery was involved in this region. But then, so when I look at the oral tradition,
You are asking for Sikkim only.
Yes, sir. So this region only, Sikkim.
Yeah.
So, but when I read the oral traditions, I see that the oral traditions are replete with the evidence of pottery. They have many folktales associated with pottery, and so I'm very confused whether.
No question of getting confused. It's and Sikkim, you must be knowing, Archaeological Survey of India worked long back with a double-eye, harvester and all. Subsequently, Intra work. They have got a book. And one girl from Santiniketan under Subrat Chakravarti has worked on the Neolithic cultures of Kalimpong. You must be knowing.
Yes, sir.
These are the work.
So Sarah lecture.
But as regards the pottery is concerned, you will bound to get potteries, but there are very few evidences. I will give a beautiful parallel. You belong to that area. Go to Sikkim, to the villages. If you take the percentage of the pottery, you will find 80% of their containers are of bamboos and wood, or more. More than 80% are of bamboos or wood container. Potteries are very less, because pottery break complete Northeast. Even today, you will find bamboo container goes for a pretty long time. And the wooden containers. And those have been completely perishable materials, gone in time. Pottery, they must have manufactured. We have got the indications, as you said, from the literary evidences, but you will find very, very less. Even today, go to any villages, your houses, Sikkim, North Sikkim, houses. Do you know? There are houses without using a single iron nail. Buildings have been constructed. 100% is wood. You go to their houses, probably 90% of the cultural material are of perishable material. So you will get, but you'll have to look for it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, thanks a lot, sir. It's a wonderful journey from what's the actually understanding this archaeology and how it understand, and the objective is to reconstruct the human behavior. So
Right.
really, it's very amazing. बहुत ही अच्छी तरह से आपने इसे समझा दिया। बेसिक से लेकर के जो लोग आज इस फील्ड में काम कर रहे हैं, हमारे महाराष्ट्र स्टेट आर्कियोलॉजी डायरेक्टर जो सुन रहे थे, उन्होंने भी अपना कमेंट यहाँ इस तरफ लिखा है।
Dr. Tejas is there.
यस 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 यस। सो बहुत ही अच्छा ये रहा, और निरंतर हम आगे भी जुड़े रहेंगे, और आपका मार्गदर्शन जो है हमें मिलता रहेगा। इसी उम्मीद के साथ जो है आज का हमारा सेशन हम यहाँ पर होते हैं। थैंक यू सर, थैंक्स अ लॉट।
Thank you, thank you. I'll be happy if the students are convinced about the prehistory. Prehistory is not that dry. It's
Yeah.
something beyond stone tools. Stone tools
Yes.
is not the end of prehistory. There are many, many interesting things in prehistory.
Yes, yes. So thank you, thanks a lot, sir,
Thank
once again. And yeah, we'll stop our today's session here. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So can we get a recording of this if we want to listen to it? How we can access it in future?